It's taking some. For the first time ever, Customer Engagement Insider is delivering an online event. For the first time ever, the customer management practice team is empowering you to elevate your digital CX engagement strategies. For the first time ever, before an audience of the world's most passionate customer engagement leaders, I have the privilege of saying, it is time. I could not be more excited to kick off CEI's online event series with today's event on digital CX and engagement. Over the course of our sessions today, we're going to be diving into our research about the state of digital CX. We're going to explore gig work opportunities and why it could be the future of how we serve our customers. We're going to learn how one of the world's hottest brands is delivering human experiences in the digital world. We're going to understand how to optimize our digital user experience strategies, and we're going to look at personalization in an increasingly low-touch and conversation-free world. Now, as a reminder, all sessions will be recorded so you can relive the magic over and over again. You can also chat and ask questions at any time, and you're going to want to, not only because our speakers will be thrilled to answer, but because we have our leaderboard going. And based on your activity throughout the platform today, you'll be racking up points. The person with the most points wins a $75 Amazon gift card. Now, I know what you're seeing. There's already someone on the leaderboard with like 1 billion points. Well, I want to give props to that person for making the effort early, and we're most certainly not going to penalize him. We're already crowning him one of our winners, and he's got himself a gift card. But we're also not going to penalize you who didn't start early, so we'll be rewarding one more winner based on the final scores later today. As another reminder, you can ask questions of our support team at any time using the icon above. Without further ado, let's dive into the event with our first session brought to you by, well, me. It is our analyst chat, and we're thrilled to explore research from our upcoming market study on digital CX and engagement. Now, if you're part of this event, you're getting a sneak preview of our stats. These have not been shared anywhere. The report doesn't come out for another week or so. So you're getting the very first taste of this data that can empower you to elevate your digital experiences. Now, joining us will be our lead content analyst and researcher for the CEI team, and that's Phil Mandelbaum. So Phil, how's everything going?
Great. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks, Brian.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you. I mean, again, your background when it comes to the digital UX side of things is so important here because, one of the areas is we forget that even before the interaction takes place, even before someone buys something or engages with our support team, they're making lasting impressions of our brand. And if we don't consider every facet of that journey, we're going to be missing out. And UX is something we want to cover. But before getting to that, I want to look at one of our arguably most impressive findings in this study. It brought up the idea of collaboration. So we asked our respondents, how frequently do your different customer-facing teams collaborate when it comes to the digital experience? And based on a history of silos and not talking to each other and fragmentation, I'll be honest, I probably expected the data to be a little weak and really people saying we need to collaborate better. But there actually was some good stats here. 37% say that their customer-facing departments regularly collaborate and they actually feel their digital strategy is unified. And another 30% say that they occasionally collaborate, so that's key as well. But one of the things I want to get your take on is really thinking about what collaboration ultimately means here, right? Because so often we're coming from the world of customer support where it's just as long as your support team knows what your marketing team is up to or knows what's being sold, they can really answer those questions. But with digital, there's so many moving pieces. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts on maybe some non-traditional areas where collaboration is necessary, or just in general, the different things we need to be thinking about as we work together.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have one outside the box answer to the first question, but I'll save that to the end of my response. I think most importantly, I say this with everything, celebrate our successes, 37%, I think you said, and then, the other 30 or so percent that are collaborating some of the time. That's great. I'd like to see 100%. And the reason really is because what we are doing now in digital is providing consistency and transparency and empathy across all of our communications. That means not just personalizing our content, but truly understanding our customers, our products, the customer's pain points, and how our products address them. And everyone needs to be on the same page. That means your digital marketing team, your sales team, and your customer success team, because we're not just building toward a sale and that's it. We're building toward developing long-lasting relationships where customer experience extends that relationship, where we can then upsell and cross-sell and even develop an influencer out of someone who has bought something. The last thing I'll say just quickly, human resources. Human resources is a huge role that no one ever thinks of in this. They can be really critical in organizing the types of training that organizations do to better equip these different teams.
Yeah, and that was one area that we're not going to cover so much in this chat, but it is part of the market study, which really is the resourcing component. Because when you're talking about not just offering digital as an extra credit, as a way to make your legacy brand a little bit more modern, but as really the foundation for your experience, you're going to need resources. You're going to need, first of all, just manpower to be able to address all the inquiries and all the new engagement. And you're going to need some expertise, because there's a difference between a brand that inauthentically goes into digital and one that truly understands how customers are using it. And that knowledge is you can train it to a degree, but if you can find people that already have it, or at least are conditioned to learn it a lot faster, that's going to really help your brand a lot. Especially in one of our upcoming sessions, we'll really look at how having people who are authentically know your brand and why they can be part of the gig workforce can be so crucial, because you're not going to have that insincere, oh, it's some guy who spent 50 years answering calls, now he's pretending to be a chat guy. But instead, you're able to really adapt the way customers always have. Another thing I would want to hit on, to your point, is the idea of metrics, because we already know that metrics do vary from department to department. Companies have different budgets, they have different KPIs for different teams, and that's always been a real sticking point with collaboration, because you can be friendly in the hallway or over Zoom to your coworkers, but if they're focusing on revenue and you're focusing on cost, or if they're focusing on customer satisfaction and you can't find a way to achieve alignment on that, then when push comes to shove, you're going to be doing your own thing, and there's going to be some fractures in the process. The other thing here is, because, as I alluded to with the UX, there are so many micro metrics, if you will, so many things that we don't even think about. Like, perfect example might be, okay, you blast 1,000 spam texts and 2 people do buy. And if you're a marketer, you're pumped. You're like, I got 2 sales out of this. I drove 2 bits of demand and it didn't really cost me anything. But if you're thinking about the customer, the relationship with that customer, you have to consider those 998 people. What they saw might not have just been something they dismissed. It might have actually been something that alienated them. And so really being aware of how different teams are operating and thinking and aligning those metrics is so key.
100%. Yeah. The first thought I had when you mentioned that text to 1,000 people was, oh, that's a terrible idea. 998 people. As soon as you say spam blast, I know that's a problem. Yeah, because the reality is that while each department is going to target very specific metrics, like UX is going to look at eye movements when they're on the page, for instance, that's not something even other parts of marketing are going to worry about. But when you develop a 360-degree digital marketing strategy, that incorporates everything. That's the whole idea behind, obviously, 360 degrees. So if every single key player or department is a participant early on and understands the strategy behind it, and then how each department has tactics to head in that direction, all on the same path, focused on that strategy, you're going to have a lot fewer problems, because at the end of the day, they all share a common goal. And while the metrics are different, if you have, for instance, a customer data platform, you're collecting all kinds of data and you're able to use that data for every purpose. You're able to understand the customer a lot more closely than you would otherwise.
Yeah. So I want to give you credit, Phil. It's almost like you read the outline of our discussion because you provided two nice transitions into two upcoming topics, one on data, the other on metrics and the user experience. And I'm going to actually jump to the user experience one because I do think it fits more nicely into this discussion. But as I do that, I'd love to see in the comments, I know some of you were there, sharing maybe areas where you're seeing either success or challenge when it comes to collaboration and which departments you feel like play the biggest role in driving your digital engagement strategy. So whether you want to ask it as a question, whether you just want to share some stories, would love to see some of those comments from our audience members. Now, in the meantime, diving into the digital UX part. So again, this is one of those areas where I think we sometimes get so excited about how easy it is to do things in as far as creating customer touch points that we forget that some of them do come with some collateral damage or some costs. You think of, okay, we had all that concern about, GDPR and other privacy regulations. Oh, we just tell our IT team, put a little pop-up in there that gets them to approve the cookie and suddenly we're good to go. Forgetting that that's an experience, right? If that cookie is annoying, if it provides information that makes the customer distrusting or suspicious about how you're using data, that could have a ramification on the overall experience. The same goes kind of for those automated pop-ups, right? Websites love having the automated opt-in box. I mean, I'm going to say maybe we've used it from time to time again, and it's, companies love the videos that pop up at the bottom of the screen to promote a product or to promote a section of content on your website. And it's all cool things we can do, but you got to remember that each of these is an experience that could have ramifications. So it's really key to look at user experience metrics. And from the study that we did, only 21% of companies say that UX metrics are an absolute priority. Now, it's not like the other companies are all ignoring them. Most of them say they're a slight priority or a decent priority. But to your point about we want 100%, I don't see how you can do digital CX if 100% of the people are not focusing on what is the experience like for the user.
Yeah, you can't. And so that statistic, this isn't something we can't come back from, guys, but that statistic is even more startling. I'm just going to give you one stat that should, directly related to something Brian said, that should maybe give you a sense of maybe you're not doing it right. More than 3/4 of people ignore the cookies pop-up banner completely. That means they don't even click on it to click it away. I mean, that's despite its adverse effects on user experience. Another study is 11% of people, website visitors, accept cookies. So we have to find a different way. And that was just one example. The other pop-ups that kind of invade the experience are distracting. And this isn't something you'll normally hear from someone in my position, but I really think this is the way we should start most conversations. Ask yourself, when you go on a website, what do you like to see and what bothers you? On your website, if you have things that bother you elsewhere, get rid of them. Then start implementing some of the things we talked about on customerengagementinsider.com in that article about UX, because there are so many quick, easy fixes, and there are so many ways to track what's working and what's not, so you can iterate and optimize.
Yeah, and the way you got to think about it is, I know that back in the day, we're so focused on what it takes. You really want that conversation, right? You want to do whatever it takes. So if you have to dial 500 people in a day in a telemarketing agency and one picks up, it was worth getting screamed at by those 499 people because you got that one call. If you do door-to-door sales and you have to knock on 100 businesses to get 5 people to open, you celebrate the 5 businesses you got to open. But the issue there was that customer wasn't evaluating every single part of the brand. They just saw you as some jerk who was calling them during dinner, or some guy who looked a little sketchy knocking on their door. When they're making the conscious or reactive decision to go to your website, use your mobile app, your brand is associated with every part of that journey. And they now, because they're in the digital world, are one click away from a competitor, from a better option. If they say no to you, the door-to-door salesman, they still have to either make the effort to find an alternative provider or wait till the next guy comes who's a little better looking or a little nicer when he knocks on the door, right? And so with the website, though, if you see that this brand is really annoying, you may never go back, and all you have to do is search competitor to insert company name. And now you find a website that's more of what you're looking for. So while it seems more minor, like, yes, a slightly annoying cookie pop-up may not be as disruptive as a hacky sales guy calling you during dinner, it's actually much more lasting as far as the brand reputation because your image is right there.
Yeah, and it's not just on site. Brian made a good point. It's the full customer journey. It's across devices. It's across platforms. So someone might have first heard of you from an influencer on social media, or someone else tags you, and or they do a search for a topic and you come up. This is their first time engaging with you, or your first time experiencing you. Then they go to your website. And then from there, they're either going to leave having never done anything. In most cases, most products, most services, most prospects, they're not going to buy on that first visit. So your site is really designed to educate, entertain, empower, inform. And from there, you can then hope to convert someone from just a passive user to a lead. Then you have the whole rest of the customer journey where they're still keeping in mind everything else they've gone through with your brand, where you then have to nurture them into an actual customer.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to think about with the digital experience, right, is, I know in the customer service contact center world, there was that movement where you don't necessarily have to wow every customer with the most magical Disney-like experience. Sometimes it's just about making it easy and reducing effort. The same is often true of the digital user experience, right? We've long been conditioned to fixate on design, making sure our page is really attractive looking and that we have like all these cool design elements. The truth is, in the mobile world, customers are more and more inclined just to go to what's simple, easy, relevant for them. So all the effort we put into having the snazziest logo and the brightest colors, take a little bit of that and put it into, making the website just easy to navigate, get what you want, not be disruptive, and you're going to see the same sense of rewards there.
Absolutely. And there are two aspects to this. There's the first, which is you absolutely have to optimize for mobile. You have to optimize for mobile page speed, for desktop page speed. And it needs to be simple, straightforward, not just for the user, but for Google. UX and SEO kind of work hand in hand. So SEO may be the reason you get there, or the user gets to your site. But if your site isn't delivering what they have searched, or isn't delivering it in a way that they can access it, they're going to leave as well. So, both of these things are absolutely critical to your actual business success.
Yep. And I know that you have a whole session dedicated to this. So we'll save some of that for the session later today. But I do want to dive into the other transition I mentioned, which is data. And it actually kind of ties into one of the comments we got from our audience members, which was about how they're focusing on collaborating for data hygiene. And data is so essential both for, any facet of just understanding your customers, understanding their journey, but especially the idea of personalization. And, one of the things I want to bring out is that, right now, only 11% of companies say that their customer intelligence program is excellent. And I also just want to disclaim, I swear it's the same 11%, because I know that Phil brought up the 11% cookie number. Just a coincidence. 11% is not our go-to fake stat. This is a real stat about, only 11% say their customer intelligence is excellent, with the majority saying it either fails at the analytical level, so they can collect a lot of insights, but they can't unify and analyze them, or at the action level, where yes, they can identify trends and actions, but they don't have the mechanism to actually take action. What are some quick recommendations you have for really making that number more positive and elevating our data programs?
Well, without a doubt, I'm a broken record. I know it. The CDP is the answer, though. I promise you. But before we get into that, which I'll just touch on quickly, because everyone should really do their own research on this specifically. But there's also the reality of multiple changes happening from a privacy perspective, and with customers expecting not the kinds of bells and whistles that Brian was talking about, but like an intimate experience with a brand, the brand to truly know them and to deliver the kind of moments that they can remember. You really need to understand your customers deeply. And it's so, in a way, the privacy changes are forcing us to do that. Third-party data truly isn't as sophisticated, isn't as valuable as the data that we are certain the customer wants us to have, and we're certain they've given us because we're collecting it directly from our website. So there's a whole article on Customer Engagement Insider on that too, making zero-party data and first-party data work for you. Even if you collect all that data, though, obviously you need to understand how to use it. And a CDP just makes all of that a lot easier. They collect and unify the data. They're able to produce and update a profile for each and every customer. It's used then for segmentation, creating custom groupings, and then for implementation and optimization as well. You're able to integrate that CDP data with all end channels like email marketing, digital advertising, and you can even use them to provide experiences offline that based off of what you've learned online. So those are my two general recommendations: zero and first party data, and put that data through a CDP.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. But what I would challenge it also, you want to make sure that your data you're able to be a little bit more robust as far as what you are collecting from their on-page behavior and their sentiment. Because, we have a stat, in this upcoming market study referencing that personalization is something that a lot of organizations are doing. So only about 15% felt that they weren't personalizing to any degree, but the majority limited their personalization to either basic account information. So, hey, Jim, great to see you again. Or, maybe based on their transaction. So for instance, that they like to respond to text. So maybe you over text them as an example. Now that's good. It's a step in the right direction. But the problem is that's what I like to call show off what you know personalization, as opposed to showing off what you can do with what you know. And really, to get to that latter stage, what you have to have is an understanding of customer intent and being able to streamline the experience and really tailor that journey to what they're looking to achieve based on the data you collect. And then also sentiment, that if you can sense that they're triggered in a happy or angry way based on something that happens on your site, that you kind of double down on that and build the experience correctly. So any thoughts on really getting to that point where we can personalize on these more meaningful factors?
First of all, you're absolutely right. Behaviors and actions are what dictate the kinds of messaging and experiencing we're supposed to be delivering. So certainly leveraging as many of those UX tools and automations. The same can be said for when you're nurturing in an email drip campaign. You don't just send out emails and hope for the best that you've pre-written and set to go. You also, through a CDP or a CRM, you have triggered emails that are behavioral based. So if someone takes an action and you establish what those actions are based off of a set of communications, you then have a follow-up set in place. So there's a lot of tools to help on the website gain more valuable information. There's a lot of tools within a CDP to do that as well. And the other part, again, is thinking from the standpoint of a customer, understanding why you're using that data and what it's for. It's not enough to personalize it by saying, hey, Jim. They need to feel like you actually respect and appreciate them. It's a whole new level of sophistication, which is why we're doing this.
Yep. And before we jump into the last part of the discussion, I do want to give a shout out to our audience member, I believe Emma, for a great take on design in the space. And I do think, so I want to just clarify that by no means, I hope I can speak for Phil, but by no means was I necessarily saying that, design doesn't matter. Just make the ugliest website, make every website look like Reddit. What I was challenging is how we define attractive design in the mobile era, because you still do see a lot of websites that focus on cool features, just pure flash that sometimes can lead to you creating an overburdening experience on the customer. As an example, like I said, that video thing where you can have a video pop up instantly giving them the news story, that is a cool tech feature. That's like an evolution from the 1990s when websites weren't able to do that, right? But what ends up happening is that you actually alienate the customer because that is not what they're looking to get to. So what I'm saying is hold your design elements accountable for their impact on things like website length, abandonment, engagement with the website. Don't just sort of assume that every pretty feature or every cool tech-driven thing is going to drive the thing. So I'm saying when you design with a purpose and design to exactly your point to drive longer retention on the website and kind of iterate and think in that fashion. I don't know if you had anything to add there, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, yes, without a doubt. No one is saying don't make a pretty website. It's actually the opposite. Nowadays, there are actually web design teams who are designing for mobile first. There's no reason you can't do that. But you can also design for desktop and with responsive and use responsive design. So it is just different on mobile. In addition, what I argue for is simple, consistent, and visually appealing. I argue for a heavy use of video and images, as well as interface and interactive elements, buttons, slider arrows, navigation bars, surveys, timelines, message boxes. All of this is very valuable, but not if you're just throwing it in there because you want to fill a site with, again, bells and whistles. As long as there's a purpose and it helps the user get down the path they and you want them to go down, then you're doing it right.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why, again, I think more than anything, we're advocating to look at the UX metrics and look at, does, to your point, we know the fruits and vegetables keep people in the grocery store. Does the bells and whistles on your website keep them there, or is it just something that's a distraction? And that's really what you want to be measuring as well. But the last point we had, and you can't really talk about any digital transformation without also talking about automation. They basically go hand in hand when you talk about technology topics in the customer engagement space. And so, just kind of looking at some takeaways from the market study, our audience identified a lot of use cases for automation, but analytics was their number one priority, with other focuses being proactive and outbound engagement, digital content and knowledge creation, chatbots and conversational AI, as well as a simplified authentication approach. Any surprises there? Anything that you think maybe companies are overlooking when it comes to the impact of automation?
I think there's probably a little bit of fear. There's always excitement and trepidation with automation because we hear about what it can do, but we're also fearful of what happens when we give up the reins. So it's definitely true that there is great value in the examples that people came up with. Data authentication, absolutely. You mentioned another one that was, I think, more customer experience oriented. And it doesn't matter. They all make sense. I wouldn't say don't automate any of those things. But I would say to expand carefully and actually plan an automation strategy, with the goals of simplifying the customer journey by eliminating unnecessary processes, approvals, data inputs, and then implementing and standardizing best practices that can go across the firm. And sometimes it can be as simple as outsourcing, providing self-service portals, for instance, for customers, consolidating apps, transferring ownership of simplified and standardized processes. But truly, there are so many things that you can automate well beyond what we even think of. There are 10 really quality apps or systems or platforms that can automate your entire marketing experience, what you provide through marketing essentially can be automated. You can do the same with sales, and you can even do that with customer success. All of these different tools have different parts that they do best. But I highly recommend looking further into the types of things that you can automate, and then just being really careful once you've done the research to get full buy-in across the organization, to implement it carefully, to test, iterate, and optimize, because you can't just put it in and go, no matter which type of automation you're talking about. You have to monitor it like anything else.
Yeah, and I know we're probably going to be cut off because I think this cuts off right at 12:30, but I do just want to throw out there that the same purposeful comment that's been a theme throughout the discussion applies to automation as well. Instead of just saying, oh, I want to automate analytics or I want to automate self-service, look at a key outcome you want to have. So you want to have 15% of your journeys be more personalized, or you want to have 30% of your support issues be proactively resolved. Because when you do that, what it tells you, first of all, is a way to measure and hold your AI accountable. It helps you find the right vendor if you're going to be relying on one, but it also lets you know what data you need, what inputs you need, as well as what stakeholders have to be involved, which is super key. So again, probably speaking fast here, we might not even have an audience if we were cut off, but I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, Phil, for a great opening session, and stay tuned as CEO